When we come back, we discuss the business of the creative sector. Stay with us. Welcome back. So this time we change gears a bit to the business aspect of our creative industries. Yes, it seems to be something we often hear it mentioned, sprinkled here and there. But there is much wealth to be derived here, even as we talk about diversification of our economy. So this morning I have with me Mr. Nigel Campbell, who is very much familiar with the creative arts industry as a music businessman. As he puts it simply, I know he's much more than that, and he has written numerous articles on the topic and thinks it's about time we pay attention to what we have before it's lost. Good morning, Mr. Campbell.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on your show.
Thanks for being here with us once again. So starting.
Yes.
Where's our cultural and creative sector industry right now with regard to business?
Where it is? Well, in the hierarchy of priorities for the government on policy, I think it's near the back of the line. But that said, it is also one of the pillars that the government is using for diversification of the economy away from oil and gas. But as it stands, of course, the greatest impact that we had in the last 2 years, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic basically decimated it and put a full stop to the creative industries in terms of live performances and outdoor activities and that kind of thing. Of course, our largest sector within the creative industries is carnival and the derivatives of that, which is music and creative arts. And annually at the budget, we get figures generated by the kind of income that is derived from carnival. And it shows that, and that number, tourist arrivals, $300 million US spent in the economy at carnival time. And that figure is used to justify that the whole creative industry is making sense. However, the creative industries are simple things like, recording music, performing it live, making movies, making advertisements, commercials, gaming, animation and that kind of thing. And all those numbers, unfortunately, are not added up because data becomes a critical area, a critical deficiency, I should say, of the creative industries locally. So we have some work to do, but at the same time, we've been doing it for quite some time and hopefully we'll get better as we go along.
You talk about so many vast areas there. And I mean, you always hear about it. It seems to only come about carnival time, as you mentioned, and we only hear of it that time. What is your advice to the government to make sure that our culture is first and forefront? And I mean, we've always heard about creative TT, music TT, and things like that. What are entities like that supposed to do in ensuring that it's capitalized in the right manner?
I think capitalize is a key word that you use there. The government has been focusing on the creative industries officially, in a sense, by having these special purpose companies since the 1990s. It was TIDCO, IDCO, TTN, and now Creative TT. And that's the business model they've been using, which is the state-owned enterprises to run sectors of the industry, in a sense, to kind of get around the kind of lethargy and red tape of the civil service. However, the priority of funding come budget time has been lower, so that the development funding for creative TT, as well as music, film, and fashion TT, has been very small, $1 million. And of course, within the last 2 years, those numbers have been cut. As I said, the government has been focusing, obviously, on oil and gas and a kind of commodity industry for many, many years. And the creative industries is a service industry, just like tourism. And it takes a kind of mental change, a kind of mind shift to refocus, as it was, to put things towards the creative industries. But at the same time, I have to be honest and admit that the creative industries, the stakeholders within the industry themselves, have some blame to take, because data is not created out of thin air. Data is created by the stakeholders providing that data. Data is also provided by formalization of certain activities. So you form your company, register your trademark, so that some data is derived so that it can be a kind of data-driven planning for what's the sector. Some of that has not been up to mark, as it was. Admittedly, the music sector, they're very hesitant to provide data, so that decisions are made not necessarily based on data, but based on the only thing that we have a metric on, which are tourist arrivals for carnival. I am not a fan of the state-owned enterprise outside of Trintalk, or not even Trintalk closed down, sorry, outside of NGC or something like that, some companies within the energy industry, a lot of these state-owned enterprises have not been successful. And the business models that they use are really 1990s business models. The creative industries are evolving globally. The industry, as you know, globally is almost $1 trillion industry based on films in Hollywood and Bollywood and everything, and music industries in major markets, USA and China and that kind of thing. We're a very small player, but we have to develop within ourselves a kind of confidence that we are able to put something out there. And we also, as a collective, have to start doing the business of, let's say, music. We have to buy music. We have to pay for downloads. We have to pay for streaming services. These kind of things, these kind of activities are not things that should have been happening many years ago. They haven't happened as yet. But as I said, now that there's a kind of renewed focus and almost like a brand new education campaign towards what the creative industries means to the economy of Trinidad and Tobago, I think some movement can happen, but it has to be a concerted effort with a much higher rate of funding, development funding. $1 million can't do much for annual budgets for creative industries.
Now, you talk about the private sector obviously taking a more proactive role. I mean, when we see things like Bungie's music appearing in, top films and TV shows and things like that, it gives us, it kind of triggers the interest. Hey, why isn't more of our music featured in films and TV shows? And then, so ideally, how is it we get it to that point? How is it we get it out there and you talk about taking pride and owning our music, but also marketing it out there. How is it we reach that, we cross that bridge?
One of the things I could talk about the music industry specifically, that this industry called the music industry, there's a phrase that somebody had used, two phrases, and I kind of combine them. That the music industry is a grand hustle where relationships are sometimes more important than talent. And I think that's critical to understand. We have to develop relationships. There's some relationships that may be out of the hands of the individual performer that may be at the level of the government, a partnership, kind of government-to-government relationship. You open a pathway, you have government-led as well as private sector-led, trade missions and that kind of thing. But relationships are critically important. But I think at the same time, because, as I said, the music industry specifically is evolving, we also have to be on the learning curve and be where the music industry is. We can't be 50 years behind the rest of the world and just be happy that we have a great soca song for 2020 or 2021. We have to be thinking about the new modes of revenue generation. You spoke about Bungie's music in a film. I remember famously in Grey's Anatomy, he had about 90 seconds of his song, different anthology, being performed. That's a matter of publishing. That's a matter of Bungie working with a music, well, not Bungie, but the Bungie's label, working with a music supervisor and getting the music on the television program. As I said, there are new ways of doing business more than just selling tickets for a show. There are multiple revenue streams that exist certainly within the music industry and within other creative industries. And how we exploit those multiple streams is a learning process, admittedly. But sometimes some of these exploitations are based on being connected to people in other parts of the world. We live in Trinidad. Some artists have set up base in New York and Brooklyn, some even in LA. But if you have to sell music in Idaho, you have to have somebody who has a reach in Idaho or somebody who has a reach in Manchester, whatever the deal is. So it is a matter of getting relationships, building relationships, because business is about relationships, admittedly. So it's about risk. So you have to make some investments, and investments can either win or lose. Creative industries is one of those industries where probably 80 and 90% of startups fail. But those 10 and 20% that do make it could cover the cost of the whole industry. So it's like it's very hit and miss. There are a lot hits. The music industry, I said, is made up of hits, but it's also made up of misses, and generally it's more misses than hits. But what you have to do is persevere, build relationships, and get that investment funding going forward.
So right now, Spotify would have been in our market in the last year or two. And how have you been seeing this helping augur the business of artists and getting paid? And I want to talk about, obviously, going futuristically. There's this thing about NFTs and owning it. So that's part ownership as well. Some people are kind of skeptical about it, just like they're skeptical about the term that you would have used, skeptical about being, taken advantage of. there's that notion, you know, entering outside of our market, Trinidad and Tobago, going beyond that. People are always afraid that they will be taken advantage of. They wouldn't get what is rightfully theirs. NFTs kind of gives ownership, sort of. Where are we in that, in terms of music in Trinidad and Tobago? And but Spotify earning money to, you know, getting our artists on air.
As I said, there are multiple streams. Yeah, I realize, yeah. But there are multiple streams of revenue, as I said. The NFT, of course, is the new kid on the block, as it was. Yeah. A kind of original certificate of ownership of an original digital asset, as it was a non-fungible token, NFT. But I am very skeptical about NFTs for startups, for independent artists. An NFT in music for an artist who has established, yeah. Getting on board of the NFT market, like most new technologies, everybody jumps on a bandwagon. It's something to do. You may get some money. Whether or not it's going to sustain an industry, and certainly here in Trinidad and Tobago, even in the Caribbean, I'm not too sure about it. A Bajan performer, Chantel, she was one of those artists who kind of came along in the wake of Rihanna's global success. She was signed to Motown Records. She's one of the pioneers of NFTs in music here in the Caribbean. She had done a song and she had put a couple original pieces on the song and some original artwork, and that was sold as an NFT. Sold in the blockchain, in the cryptocurrency market, and made a couple $1,000s. And so they have these one or two shining examples, but because I'm not seeing many examples of it, I'm not sure that it has the kind of sustainability, or yet, I should say. Admittedly, the record industry, as I said earlier, they'll have a lot more misses than hits, so they're probably parallel to each other. But tapping onto that idea of ownership and considering the kind of the idea of ownership and quote unquote foreign ownership of our things, kind of thing. Well, don't own our things. There's another element, of course, in the whole creative industries. There's a heritage element as well as a business element, and that heritage element has to do with intangible cultural heritage and these other areas that are dealt with by the UNESCO and by WIPO. And Trinidad and Tobago has been a signatory to the UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage program. The name escapes me at this very second. We've been a signatory to that since 2010. Jamaica, just by example, had signed on in 2006 or something like that, and they already have two things on: reggae music and the maroon culture of Motown in Jamaica. We signed on, and there's some steps that you have to take, and we had done some lists and some databases and that kind of thing. But as of now, Calypso, Carnival are not on. And I had, questioned that whole thing. And of course, it reared its ugly head last year when Eric Culmonger, actor Michael B. Jordan, had got a rum called Juve. Yeah. And there was a lot of angst and back and forth. But I think the critical thing about that was we were not even at the table because we had not even gotten on that intangible cultural heritage list with Carnival and the elements that make up Carnival, which include Juve. So that a trademark is a trademark, and that's a separate thing from intangible cultural heritage. But the conversation is not happening at that level. Of course, there was a lot of brouhaha, how Eric Culmonger could come in and take our name, blah 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 blah. Fair. Anybody could argue about anything. There are a million soft drinks in America called Calypso and Soca and all kind of thing like that. So those names are separate and apart from intangible cultural heritage. But again, ownership and that notion of cultural confidence, which is something that we have to be strong about. It's a matter of identity. The arguments have been made that Jamaicans are Jamaicans, whether they live in England, whether they live in Canada, whether they live anywhere else. Trinidadians, when they go to America, they're freshwater Yankees. That's a social argument. I'm not going to get too deep into that. But there's definitely some merit about the idea of cultural confidence. Yes, we support our own wherever we go, anywhere in the world. But we have to be bold about it. And we have to insist that everybody is playing their part. And as I said, since 2010, we've been signed on to that UNESCO list, and we haven't put anything on it. There's some processes that have to be done, and clearly they've been stalled or they haven't gone very far. So that the idea of ownership, the idea of revenue streams at Spotify, whether or not somebody will take our thing, there's another argument. This year is the 100th anniversary of Lord Kitchener, and a lot of his music, the music publishing, is not owned by the Kitchener family, by Olin Roberts' family. It's owned by a musician who lives in Barbados. I wouldn't call his name, but I think everybody knows who I'm talking about. So that the idea of somebody else owning our music, it kind of stabs at the heart of a lot of people. But business is business, and business is risk. And sometimes you take risks, and sometimes you win, and sometimes you lose. And if you're not able to be part of that, then creative industries is probably not something you're going to be part of. It's not a simple matter of I can sing a song, but as I can sing a song, and how do I exploit it to earn revenue and ideally to earn a profit? Those are things that artists have to look for. Those are things that practitioners and stakeholders have to be talking at that level. That's a conversation that needs to be happening. Very few artists are doing it locally, but hopefully, as I said, within the next 5-10 years, if there's a renewed focus by the government about the seriousness of the industry, I think some things can happen.
Now, with social media gravitating, you know, when she would have released the song Drink Water and Mind Your Business, that artist, Patrice would have released that song. That went viral in Hollywood. And
Big time.
Is it possible to even capitalize on social media, things like that, TikTok, trending music in such a way?
Well, there's a category of income that I've been reading about recently called non-DSP revenue. So DSPs are like service providers like Spotify and Pandora and Apple Music. And they, as a category of music stakeholders, they pay royalties to artists and publishing labels, the owners of the masters, as it was. But companies like TikTok, as you said, they are not streaming services, but and even YouTube videos where people put background music to dance to. Those big companies, TikTok and YouTube and them, are actually are now paying, of course, to the label owner. Major labels, there are 3 major labels, as well as a collective of independent labels. As I said, Trinidad and Tobago is one island in the Caribbean. We have to operate as a collective so that we have a certain threshold of impact. It's one of the unfortunate things about the creative industries. It's a volume business. If you have 1 billion views, oh, you're on my radar. If you have 10,000 views, you don't exist. So that we have to talk with a collective voice so that we can have a certain amount of impact. Because, as you said, Patrice's song, had been used as a background for, I think it was Jada Pinkett was drinking and walking off. So there are a lot of celebrities that are jumping on board. It's nice, it's getting along. But as we've probably seen, a lot of Afrobeats songs, Natwani, you know the song by CK, I can't remember the actual name. That's like the theme song for every TikTok video, right? And he has to get his money via the publishing the label that owns the masters and that kind of stuff. But he's getting money. It may not be as much money as a live gig, revenues from live gigs. It may not be as much money as even live streaming. But there are other revenue sources, and artists have to be aware of them. They have to get on board. Personally, I think that TikTok is more open to music outside of North America. So as I said, a lot of African artists and the Caribbean artists and Latin American artists are featuring, their music is featuring prominently on TikTok, more so than paid streams or streams by paid subscribers on Spotify and Apple Music. So there are opportunities, find them, work the business side of it, have a team that's trustworthy and loyal who will get you in the right place, and collectively, all the multiple streams of revenue, can get you to a point of profitability within the industry.
There's so much to be talked about here. I mean, you're seeing in America where the older artists, they're selling their musical estates, and now they're pushing it to the forefront. And that's also bridging the gap with generations. They're coming aware of their music through ads and things like that. We haven't embraced that so much. And so there's so many areas that, as you talk about the advertising industry, utilizing our culture, you know, reflecting who we are as Trinidadians. We have so much to offer when it comes to our culture. And I think we need to come back to that place of embracing who we are, not just when we feel homesick and we go abroad.
As I said, we have to start with ourselves, because the other thing that happens is that some of these companies look and see, well, okay, in your market, how is your business doing? So if the Caribbean is not buying its music or not paid subscribers on the streaming services, and they're getting things for free effectively, that doesn't look good on a business column. In terms of you're talking about musical estates, you know, famously Bruce Springsteen, Bob Dylan, these artists are selling their estates. They're also pushing 70 and 80. So it's about estate planning. If somebody hands you $300 million at 80 years old, hey, that's good. We also know that many years ago, there's this famous thing about you never sell your music, right? I'm not sure that Paul McCartney is going to sell his music or Elton John is going to sell their music. But they have huge catalogs which are generating income. And the new owners of those catalogs are utilizing the music, as I said, in synchronizing it with advertising or in movies. There are possibilities. We do have artists in Trinidad, as the Bungie example is a classic one, of artists having their music synchronized to television and for film and that kind of thing. But it's small steps at this point in time. It's not that it is not happening. It is happening, but it's small steps. We as a public are not going to see that unless it reaches a certain threshold. That threshold comes with sharing data. That threshold comes with numbers that we can see and recognize. One step at a time.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. I know we could go on and on about this topic. It's so many avenues. The potential is vast that we have not tapped into. So thanks for being with us this morning and giving us an insight.
Thank you for having me.
It's small things, but big things that can happen.
Big possibilities. Yes,
definitely.
Correct. Thanks, Kimberly.
Take care.
Bye.
Well, that's how we wrap this Tuesday edition of A New Day.